I'd grown used to spring rain in New York, but somehow the storm battering my apartment window that morning felt different, heavier. Maybe that's why Grace's name flashing across my phone sent a jolt through me, a name from another lifetime, from Greenville, a place I'd spent years trying not to remember. My heart stuttered as I answered, bracing myself against whatever old ghosts she might bring with her voice. Grace didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Lauren, I'm so sorry. Your dad passed last night. I thought you should hear it from me." I pressed my forehead to the cool window pane, closing my eyes. Dad and I hadn't spoken for 5 years, not since that final argument that sent me packing, vowing never to look back. Still, hearing those words from Grace, the grief wasn't as clean as I'd hoped. It was messy, knotted up with resentment and unfinished business. Funny how the past waits patiently for you, no matter how far you run. Dad always said, "You can always come home, Lauren, but you might not recognize it anymore." I could practically hear his voice, half wry, half loving, drifting through the static of memory. Had he ever imagined how true that would become? Booking the flight was mechanical. Search, click, confirm, my hands moving on autopilot while my mind circled through memories best left untouched. The last fight with Dad played out in my head during the cramped ride to the airport. His disappointment, my anger, the way Diana, my stepmother, had quietly taken over the house until there was hardly a trace of Mom left. Even the furniture had changed, each piece a silent eviction of the life I'd known. By the time the plane dipped below the clouds, Virginia was glowing with dogwood blooms. I spotted Grace waiting for me outside arrivals, waving from behind the wheel of her battered Subaru, the same one she'd had in college. Her hug was brisk and grounding, smelling of rain and vanilla coffee creamer. The drive into Greenville was a slow-motion reel of memories. Porch swings hung with faded bunting, neighbors pausing their yard work to wave, storefronts spruced up with pastel wreaths for the season. "They're all talking about you, you know," Grace said, tossing me a sideways glance as we turned onto Maple Avenue. "Word travels fast. Church ladies have probably got your entire childhood memorized." It was a joke, but I could feel the weight of every glance as we drove past. My father's funeral had turned the town into a pressure cooker of casseroles, whispered prayers, and speculation about what would happen next. We pulled up to the house, or what used to be home. The garden was clipped and controlled, all wildflowers gone. Diana's silver Lexus was in the driveway, flanked by Tyler's slick new truck and a rental I didn't recognize. Even from the curb, the house looked smaller, less forgiving. Maybe it was just me. Inside, everything gleamed, glass, chrome, an artful coldness that left nowhere to rest your eyes. Diana stood by the staircase, dressed in morning black, her lipstick perfect. "Lauren," she said, air-kissing my cheek. "We weren't sure you'd make it. Your flight was all right, I trust." I managed a nod. "Fine, thank you." My old room was gone, of course. "We've converted it for storage," Diana explained, her tone almost apologetic, as if I should have expected it. "You'll be in the guest room at the end of the hall." Grace lingered at the doorway, squeezing my hand before heading out. "Call me if you need rescuing," she whispered. I tried to smile, suddenly aware of how tightly I was gripping my suitcase. Dinner was early, Diana's rule, I remembered. The table looked beautiful, all white linens and crystal, but the atmosphere was anything but welcoming. Tyler scrolled his phone, not looking up. Brittany, always Diana's shadow, poured water for everyone and offered carefully scripted condolences. Every conversation felt like a test, and I kept failing, answering questions with one-word replies, stumbling over small talk about weather and travel. Somewhere between the green bean casserole and the ham, I caught snippets of hushed talk. "We'll move on the Riverside property as soon as Harold finalizes things," Diana whispered, her voice carrying more than she intended. "The market's hot, we can't wait." I pushed my food around, appetite gone. Dad and I had walked those lots together when I was a girl, talking about how land was a legacy you couldn't fake. Was this what it came down to in the end? Property, paperwork, and empty plates? As dessert, store-bought pie was served, Brittany leaned over, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Lauren, but you're not expected at the will reading tomorrow. Diana says it's for family only." For a moment, the words just floated in the air, heavy and cold. I felt my face flush, the same hot shame I'd carried since that last night under this roof. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and excused myself early. In the guest room, I unpacked by rote. The room was impersonal, neutral walls, a single armchair, no trace of childhood anywhere. But when I slid the closet door open, something fluttered to the floor. A photo, me and Dad, arms slung around each other at the county fair, sunburned and laughing. The edges were curling, the ink faded. Taped behind it was a tiny, old-fashioned skeleton key. I sat on the bed, clutching the photo and the key, listening to the rain drum against the window and the house creak with secrets. Funny how a place can be both familiar and foreign, haunted and hollow, all at once. Downstairs, I could hear the low murmur of Diana's voice, the clink of dishes, the persistent sound of the past refusing to stay buried. I traced my finger along the outline of Dad's handwriting on the back of the photo, a note I'd long since memorized. "Proud of you, kiddo. Never forget where you come from." Some things, I realized, can't be erased. Not by paint, or property sales, or even 5 years of silence. Maybe, just maybe, I hadn't come home for closure after all. Maybe I'd come home to find something I'd lost, if I could remember how to look for it. Sometimes, it's the smallest things that can split open a locked-up past. That first night, with the rain never letting up, I held the old skeleton key in my palm, feeling its cool ridges press into my skin. I turned it over and over, as if it might answer the question I was too afraid to say out loud. Why would Dad hide a key from me after all this time? I hardly slept, the house a creaking, restless presence around me. Dad's old phrase kept echoing. If you want the truth, look where nobody else does. By 3 a.m, I couldn't take it anymore. I wrapped myself in my old college sweatshirt, slipped out into the dark hallway, and padded down to what used to be my room. The door stuck a little. Inside, my childhood was stacked in cardboard boxes, shoved behind plastic bins of holiday decorations. I slid the key into the old closet lock, feeling a tiny click, a sound I remembered from long ago. Inside the closet, I found a dusty shoebox, its lid decorated with faded stickers from the 90s. My heart jumped. I carried the box to the bed and lifted the lid. There it was, my mother's favorite perfume bottle, nearly empty but still fragrant with a scent that made me ache. Pressed flowers, their colors barely clinging to memory. And letters bundled in Dad's careful, looping script. I read the top one by phone light. "Lauren, if you're reading this, look inside the Count of Monte Cristo." There was more, but my eyes blurred with tiredness and a familiar raw grief. Had he meant for me to find this now or years ago? I tucked the letters into my pocket, determined to see it through. The library was colder than the rest of the house, all glass and chrome now instead of cozy shelves and sun-faded armchairs. I ran my finger along the spine of the Count of Monte Cristo, feeling the weight of every time Dad had pressed it into my hands, talking about hidden treasure and plans within plans. The book slid off the shelf easily. I thumbed through, and a small envelope fell to the carpet. Inside, a safe deposit key and a note in Dad's handwriting, some things Diana must never see. I pressed the book to my chest, the familiar cover rough against my skin. My hands trembled not just from nerves, but from the sense that for the first time in years, Dad was right here, guiding me. Even from beyond, he was still teaching me how to look for the truth. Back in my room, I called Grace. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but warm. Couldn't sleep either, huh? She teased, but I could hear the concern underneath. I told her about the key, the letter, and the book. She whistled softly. Your dad never did anything by accident, Lauren. Maybe it's time you finally learned what he was planning. The next morning, the rain had let up, but the world was heavy and damp, the air thick with magnolia and fresh mud. I walked to the town bakery where Margaret Wilson, Dad's longtime assistant, was always first in line for coffee. She gave me a quiet, conspiratorial smile as she poured sugar into her cup. You're back for good, Lauren, one of the women at the counter asked, her voice too loud in the quiet shop. Margaret handed me a napkin folded around a small piece of paper. Your father trusted you, Lauren. He said you'd know what to do when the time came. On the paper was the name of a local bank and a street address. She gave my hand a gentle squeeze. Be careful. Diana's been active. Grace picked me up in her car, coffee and biscuits warming the air between us. As we drove, she recounted stories from the past year, how Diana had managed Dad's illness, making decisions and closing doors, both literal and figurative. She started talking about selling the Riverside property before your dad was even gone, Grace muttered. Didn't seem right. At the bank, I presented the key and ID, nerves prickling at the base of my spine. The manager led me to a small, private room and placed a long, narrow box on the table. My hand shook as I lifted the lid. Inside, deeds to the Riverside property and several others. Legal documents, signatures, transfers, notations in Dad's tidy print. And at the very bottom, a slim flash drive labeled in black ink, for Lauren if you ever need to fight. I stared at it, the reality of it all finally sinking in. Dad had made plans for me, even when I'd thought he'd given up. He must have known things weren't what they seemed with Diana. I slipped the flash drive into my purse and signed the forms the manager handed me, my fingers barely steady. Grace dropped me at her apartment to use her laptop. My own was locked up in New York, and I didn't dare use the family computer. I plugged in the flash drive and waited. The video opened with Dad sitting at his desk, thinner than I remembered, but eyes still sharp. Lauren, he began, his voice steady, if you're seeing this, it means you found what I left for you. I want you to know I never stopped believing in you. Diana, well, she's complicated. I made mistakes, but I won't let her undo what I built for this family, for you. The deeds and documents are legally yours. If anyone tries to stop you, use them. Don't let anyone, especially Diana, bully you out of your inheritance. You were always the one I trusted to do right by this land. He paused, looking almost straight through the screen. This may get ugly, but remember, you're stronger than you think. And you're not alone. The video ended. Grace put a hand on my shoulder. He was proud of you, Lauren. He always said so. That night, as I walked back through Greenville, past the dogwoods and the tidy porches, I felt the past and future colliding. Dad's lessons echoed in every step. I remembered those long-ago afternoons riding shotgun on property tours, listening as he explained how to spot good land, how to negotiate, how to trust your gut when everyone else doubted you. Margaret waved from the bakery window. I waved back, and for the first time since I'd arrived, felt a thread of hope tugging me forward. The fight wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning. Back at the house, the rooms felt less oppressive, the rain outside a comforting rhythm. I slipped the deeds and the flash drive under my mattress. Tomorrow, I'd have to face Diana, face the questions, the accusations, the family drama that was bound to erupt. But tonight, I let myself remember what it was like to be the girl Dad believed in, fearless, resourceful, and just a little bit stubborn. Sometimes, in a life filled with locked doors, all you need is a key and the memory of someone who loved you enough to leave a light on.